ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। जननीं शारदां देवीं रामकृष्णं जगद्गुरुं पादपद्मे तयोः श्रित्वा प्रणमामि मुहुर्मुहुः। नमः श्रीयतिराजाय विवेकानन्दसूरये सच्चित्सुखस्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे। I hope the audience here can understand both English and Tamil. Anybody? Okay. So it's only English. Thank you. Not that I am good in Tamil, but it gives a bit of relaxation if we can switch to Tamil now and then, but not necessary. Today's and henceforth two more classes, so including 3, it will be a brief recollection of ideas related to practical Vedanta. It is one topic which has been very well elucidated by Swami Vivekananda, much debated, very much, in fact, challenged by the so-called the orthodoxies. And what is now left for us is to actually take a serving within and see how much we can get benefited out of it. Because that's what practical is all about. We read, I come from a college background, being the secretary of a college. We have a lot of theory courses. So students come and ask me, Acha, what is the practicality of all the theory courses that we study? So practical components were introduced and guys are taken through this forked learning called theory and practical. It's a forked learning. So in some classes you learn theory, and in other supporting classes people are taken through practicals, what they have studied in the theory. So Swami Vivekananda chose to elucidate this topic of practical Vedanta as a 2-part lecture, in fact a 3-part lecture, not with the idea of trying to bring out a separate practical session of a theoretical component. It's never like that. I mean, there's only one way to learn, and that learning is by doing. Because we can understand when Swami Vivekananda landed in Colombo, he was asked to give a talk to the assembled audience, and then he said, the subject is vast and the time is short. So if we take up a very detailed theoretical approach and then try to understand the tenets and then try to see what can be practiced and what cannot be, it's going to be a task which will span across several lives, which anyway we are agreeable to do that. But nevertheless, can we hasten this approach? Swami Vivekananda was very much of a teacher, just like his master Sri Ramakrishna, that he doesn't like middling with things. In fact, once Sri Ramakrishna in Dakshineshwar, he was having fun with all the youngsters around. All were about, 20 plus. Master Mahashay, who was about 26 or maybe 25, was considered old. So imagine the average age group around Sri Ramakrishna. And he was making a lot of fun for that age group. And people were rolling in laughter on the ground. And all of a sudden, he says, there was a person who was singing, and then the song goes like this: "O mind, take the name of the mother, and gradually you will get to realize her." The moment he heard the word "gradually you will get to realize her," then Sri Ramakrishna became very serious. He says, I don't like the theme of the song at all. Why it should be gradually? It should be now and this moment. Imagine, just the previous moment, they were all having fun, and he turns serious, and then he throws his legs and arm outward and inward like a child, who wants to get its work done through the mother, an untenable demand. And then the mother refuses, and you can see how the child is revolting, sitting on the floor, throws the limbs far wide and then convulses. And with tears in the heart, chest turned red with tears. And Master Mahasaya writes, how is it that in one moment he gets transfixed to another mood? And he could drive in a sense of urgency in calling the name of the mother. And not have a settled notion of, sometime we will get. If not today, tomorrow is always there. Sri Ramakrishna never encouraged this kind of a middling attitude. And same with Swami Vivekananda. In all his lectures, he was stressing upon the practicality only with the singular intention that it be tested. It be tested right now, this moment onwards. That was his focus. The traditional Vedanta is a subject which encourages impartial inquiry. Never it permits the aspirant to take things for granted. There are no doctrines. There are no dictates. That is one huge plus point about the topic of Vedanta. And the traditional approach of the inquiry, which is very much in vogue, it's very much necessary also. Usually the treatise not from the Upanishads. By the way, when we say treatise, we mean the Prakarana Granthas, written by the Acharyas and then many of the erudite scholars who have also practiced in their life to a great extent. So the orthodoxy as promulgated by these torchbearers usually talk about the two phases in the inquiry, Vedantic inquiry. One is, all we know, is about the adhyaropa, the superimposition. And then the second phase is called apavada, which is desuperimposition. Their understanding is, which Swami Vivekananda differed. Swami Vivekananda differed from this approach. I'll just throw a small light, a ray of light on the traditional approach. By the way, when Swami Vivekananda said anything, he never contradicted the canons that we have with us in the form of Prakarana Granthas as well as the Pramana texts. Never he went against. It's just that he created a perspective of how to look about this entire corpus of Vedic knowledge. He gave a different perspective. So, oftentimes you will find that he differs from an orthodoxy standpoint. Not to contradict, but to only emphasize on the preliminaries and the primitives, because, I always tell myself that if we have an end in the view, the beginning must be aligned to the end. If the beginning is like a man who is shooting a gun, a target which is several kilometers away, snipers, that's what they do, right? So when you aim at a target And even if there is going to be a 1 degree variation in the aim, it's going to miss the target by several tens of meters, if not kilometers. The farther the target, the farther is going to be the myth. That's why aligning the beginning with the end is very important. So the orthodoxy begins the inquiry with Adhyaropa. It says, "O man, know that you are bound." Even the question in the Vivek Chudamani, somewhere in the 50s it comes. Ko nama bandha, katamesha agataha, katam pratisthasya, katam vimokshaha. 4 questions, fantastic questions. So, ko nama bandha, what is meant by bondage? So, the inquiry wants to make us feel that the bondage is something that we need to be inquired first. The inquiry itself is such that we need to understand that we are bound. Are we making a mistake? It is educating a sadhaka, an aspirant, saying that, "Oh my dear student, he is going to the class. The teacher says, you are a fool. You don't know anything. You are weak. You are a dumb, if not worse. So I am here to teach you." So if a class begins like this, can the teacher, the student, be at sync with the teacher? That's tough, correct? That is not the common modern day practices. But then why is it that the scripture, at least the Prakarana Granthas, Upanishad is not saying that, by the way. Upanishad never gives this idea. But the way the Upanishadic message is communicated through various channels of these secondary texts, which are written by lesser mortals, scholars and erudition, and they have their own knowledge and their orthodoxy to their backing. No denial of the fact. No denial of the fact, and I salute, prostrate before them. But why is it that the emphasis should be on the bondage? And say that Davagni Tapta, you are burnt in the fire. Why is there so much of negativism in the very beginning of the message of Vedanta? And then the fellow goes on hearing and then gets tired and then maybe say that, then he says, "Yeah, oh Lord, please tell me, Master, please tell me what's the way out." So it's like, beating the man almost to the point of no recovery and then telling him that if you want life, find the nectar in Vedanta, in the Atma. So that was one approach, a traditional approach, and mind you, it works. It's not that it doesn't work, it works because the man is poisoned with so much of sense enjoyments that he is literally driven to the point of delirium, not knowing where actually he needs to go. That is one section of people. That's one section of people. People who have already underwent some amount of burning in their lives and not knowing really what is the source of this burning. And to them, naturally the message has to be kind of saying that, "Hey guys, you have gone wrong in all these days. Therefore you mend your ways. And what's the way? Come, let me lead you." Perfectly all right. Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha. This approach is a Vanaprastha approach. The guy has already spent a lot of his priceless youth in the pursuit of something which is trivial. And there's no more time for him to further spend it, no more luxury for him to spend it. And therefore, he finds himself stranded and he says this, "Well, I seem to be lost somewhere. What is the way out?" But if you go and tell a brahmachari who is just stepping into the portals of learning, he says, "Hey, you are bound." I mean, he doesn't even understand the terminology of what bondage is. Try to entertain a kid and make the kid laugh with a joke. And that is the toughest task you will find, is to make a child laugh at a joke. Because it requires some amount of, understanding of a nonsense. to appreciate a joke. Because almost all jokes have a bit of nonsense in it. Okay, so this guy who is entering into the portals of Vedic learning, Vedantic learning, and you go and tell him that, man, you're bound. Rather, if you tell him, you see, the yonder sky is shining, brilliant, powerful, and that very power is lodged within your heart, within yourself. All power is within you. This guy is now set to thinking himself, all power is within me. While it took me 1 hour to come to this college or school, battling against all the traffic, not be having any control over the circumstances that I was put through, this man comes here and says that I have all the power within me. I mean, that's what is called shaking once. The man doesn't have to be convinced of his weakness. He already knows his weakness. What is the necessity for a treatise to dwell on at length on that which is very, very evident? So Swami Vivekananda changed the gears. So he started with the message that each soul is potentially divided. And in fact, you will find, take my word, or rather, you don't have to take my word. Take that book, Complete Works. Take any chapter, any text of his. Go through that. Does he start with a negative note or a positive note? He always starts with a positive note. The sun in the yonder sky should be the singular verdict of our real nature, not the bondage. When the bondage that needs to be forgotten and forsaken into the hands of whatever lesser things, why do I need to dwell in those thoughts? So the practical Vedanta puts the horse before the cart and makes the journey much more safer and sound, purposeful. We'll come to that. And in the meanderings, we often ask this question, that what is this life that has got to offer itself for us? You know, quite often we are misled to believing certain common notions. I want to say misled to believing because how are we misled? Not because just somebody says, it's because everybody follows. That's the kind of misleading we often encounter. So when we ponder about the topic of what will be the goal of life, invariably you will see there are several debates which actually concludes saying that happiness is the goal of life. So much so that UN has created something called as a happiness index. United Nations have defined a metric called a happiness index. And then they have a very elaborate way of computing this index. For the simple reason that happiness seems to be the goal of life. Everybody is seeking happiness. In fact, you know, during my pre-monastic times, when I had a brief stint in my professional footing, there one motivator was pressed into service by the company. So he wanted to set perspectives for how we as a human being can lead a life bordering in excellence. So he mooted the whole discussion saying that, what is the goal of life? He looked at everyone. There may be about 40 of those guys there, okay? So he looked at each one of us and then said, what could be the goal of life? Happiness? Yeah? All of us seek happiness? Then everybody, like a Tanjavur Bommai, ding, 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 ding. Everyone was actually nodding their head. And then, sorry? So everyone was nodding their head saying, happiness is the goal of life. I am seeking happiness. And then, so taking a lot of courage from the very passive acceptance of this proposition, so he further went about saying that now, how do we grow on happiness? And so on and so forth. I was one of the participants. And by the way, what he said was all made sense. They all made sense subsequent to accepting the fact that happiness is the goal of life. The aim. The sniper takes an aim which is 3.7 kilometers away, and there is a 1 degree miss. Taking the happiness as the goal of life. How did the generalization come into picture, by the way? Because everyone seems to be seeking happiness. Can there be a rule of 3 here? Just because 3 people out of 4 seek a particular objective, can that be made? Can a generalization be made on that? Can we do it or not? If we do it, that means that you should accept the fact that every living being hungers for food. Invariably, every day, thrice a day, in fact. So food must be therefore the goal of life. If majority is what is going to set the very basis for generalization, then let us worship food. True. Annam brahmeti vyajanat. Upanishad has not ignored this fact. Upanishad has not, but it has not kept that as a goal of life. That cannot be the goal of life. So they say, Ahara nidra bhayamaitu nanam samanyametat pashubhir naranam viveko hi ekah adhikah visheshaha vivekah hinaha pashubhis samanah. So ahara is food. So at the level of food, there is certainly a common seeking among all the living beings. Why only human beings? We really do not know whether the lower living beings are really seeking happiness or not. So if you want to do a very glorious generalization, you must include even the living beings into the picture. Even the plants into picture. All the living things have to be taken into picture while doing the generalization. Because life is one. And food happens to be the central theme of the life across all the forms. So why should we single out the human being in this and say that happiness should be the goal of life? So the quick generalization that is done here is done on a wrong basis. Even though Sat, Chit, Anandam is part of the definition of Brahman, happiness cannot be the goal of life. For the very reason of because of the method that has been adopted to arrive at this conclusion. The method is, it's not just because each one of us are seeking happiness that the happiness becomes the goal of life. Where at all an inquiry begins? Why should there be an inquiry at all? So the couplet which I narrated a little while ago, Vivekaha eva adhikaha visheshaha. That viveka, which is discrimination, many people put that, various lot of things there. Bhakti they will put, jnana they will put, vairagya they will put. Chandas may go, helter-skelter, but they are all something which uniquely defines a human being. So, in the matters of inquiry, which is the best time to do? Is it like the Vanaprastha time or while we are, they say at the time of death, the people always get to wake up to the realities. So at the time of death, if we reckon the truth, that is sufficient. Still postponing it. Or should we make a beginning when we get into the so-called the active worldly life? Or is it that at the very beginning of the life when we enter into the portals of learning, should we have to make an inquiry? Actually, what triggers this inquiry? Swami Vivekananda makes a very, very interesting observation here. He says, religion, he puts everything, Vedanta, all different forms of worship, inquiry, everything he puts it under one huge bracket called religion. Okay, religion doesn't mean of those, the further divided ones. So he says, religion takes over the moment a soul starts asking this one question, what is death? and what is beyond death. This is if this phenomenon alone is ignored by kind of a very strange psychological, I should say, complication or whatever, if we can successfully ignore the idea of death from our constitution and don't contemplate on death at all, not being aware of death at all. We don't even have to contemplate on death at all. Suddenly we come, we go, and then we vanish. If death is removed from this entire constitution, then there won't be any necessity for religion at all. It is death which makes us think as of how the life in the present time should be led. And the discussion with regards to the goal of life, the purpose of life, answering the questions about life, a variety of questions, is not an easy chair profession. Because quite often we find that when three people get together over a cup of tea, they want to discuss something. Okay? Now these questions are very interesting because you can endlessly keep discussing, not coming to any confined and confirmed conclusion. And next time when you meet again over a table of coffee, we can again discuss. So in the elite group, often we find that this discussion goes on endlessly. So it serves a purpose of keeping yourself engaged alternatively for a hobbyist. But then, this is an easy chair attitude of asking a question. The question should be asked in the manner that I need to seek an answer for it. And such questioning has happened. Our scriptures, they have narrated a variety of conversations that has been recorded at a variety of places. High mountains, deep forests, household, battlefield, and at the door of death. Why is it that the question about the goal of life, the purpose of life, the aims of life have been discussed in all these many variety of circumstances and environments? For the simple reason that it is applicable everywhere. Be it in the high peak mountains, or be it in the household, or be it at the door of death, when Nachiketa was actually pushed into that predicament, and he came out with wonderful answers. Such discussions are being held only to and even in Rajya Sabha, Janaka Yajnavalkya Samvada. It's happening in the king's palace, where the Vidushas are all there. As a competition he holds, Janaka puts forth a question, saying that whoever can answer this question will be taking all the 1,000 cows, bedecked with golden ornaments. And what was the challenge? Whoever is going to be the best among you will take the lot. And what is going to be the subject of discussion? Vedanta. So even as a challenge or a competition, it's being held. Yajnavalkya was the invariable winner in that, because he was really a soul. That was very interesting. So there is no specific place or time to begin the inquiry about the aims and the goals of life. It can be done on the fly. I am drawn to one particular mantra in Mundaka Upanishad. Brahma Vidya, Sarva Vidya Pratishtha. This is a very powerful mantra. Remember, when Swamiji says all power is within you, all knowledge is within you, correct? These two statements actually stems from the Pramana Vakya coming from Mundaka Upanishad, Brahma Vidya, Sarva Vidya Pratishtha. That all different knowledges, so to say, they are all founded on the Brahma Vidya. And the individual soul being the very embodiment of the Brahman, of the Atma, naturally I possess all knowledge. Therefore all power is within me, all knowledge is within me. Correct? No, but how do I... There was one guy actually who asked me this question when I was a bit more enthusiastic about this verse, saying that, wow, what a wonderful message we get from the Upanishads. He said, so do you mean to say that a man who has Brahma Vidya can become a Nobel laureate? Or can he work out a mathematics, an unsolved mathematics problem? There are so many. Those who are erudite in theoretical mathematics and computer science will know P equal to NP is $1 billion problem. Right? So, can he have answers to such questions? Then he can get $1 billion. This moment he can get, if he can bring out answers, because all knowledge is within you. Actually, I was not able to answer him, because I was literally looking at the statement of knowledge, meaning knowledge of the particulars. Knowledge of the particulars. If you take an engine has got various parts. Knowledge of the engine means, of course, knowledge of each of those particles, each of those particulars, the organs, the parts, the alignment, the configuration, the wiring. The knowledge of everything is important for me to say that I know the engine knowledge. So they are all knowledge of the particulars collected together, giving the knowledge of another particular called engine, which is different from the whole vehicle for that matter. And then the knowledge of the vehicle, of course, is again a particular because other vehicles are not included into that. Other genres are there. Maybe you know a four-wheeler, you don't know how a two-wheeler works. So knowledge of the particulars, take each one of them, put them collectively, having a generalization over it and saying that is Brahma Vidya, and then if I know Brahma Vidya, therefore as a corollary, as a converse statement, I should be knowing about each of those particulars. In fact, I myself was thrown into weird imagination. As how can I explain this? That the knowledge of the Brahman is the foundational knowledge of all knowledges. Don't you think that this is actually a real puzzle? Mountaineering, you require skilling, tremendous amount of skilling. All power is within you. Now, can you climb? Let us try. You may say, then what happens? Sometimes those who are a bit fanatic about this, they will say, hey, you don't know. When the power manifests, you can do. Just because you're not able to do, how do you say that the person who has manifested cannot do it? He becomes a more fanatic with the idea that all power is within you means, of course, certainly all powers are within you. You will be able to strike a thunderbolt. Provided you put your mind into it. I mean, they are the kind of, blindly accepting something mystical happening. When you suddenly come to possess a specific power which a person who struggled so hard to get it, and then by a mere trace of a Brahmajnana, so to say, I'm just using that word, that he will get to do that. Then where is the value for work? The karma cannot be denigrated. An effort has to be put to acquire a particular skill. It is must. It has to be done. That effort is necessary. Then you mean to say that acquiring Brahmajnana subsumes all efforts? So I myself was actually led to this confusion and started thinking, how can knowledge and power, everything be, so to say, contained within this Brahman, and I have access to it by getting Brahmajnana? So then came, after sufficient amount of contemplation, I was partially able to convince myself with this small anecdote. So there was a guy, he was partially blind. He was accosted by a friend. They both were walking, and then by chance he hit upon a sapling. He couldn't see the sapling. He hit upon the sapling and obstructed. He stopped and then said, "Hey, what hit me?" So the guy who was accosting him said, "You hit against a small tree." You know, it's easy to ask a question. Next question, what is a tree? Then the guy said, "Yeah, a tree is that which has got a root below the ground and a shoot above the ground." So he's trying to define tree to the man who hasn't had the total comprehension of this object called tree. Okay, I require your empathetic listening rather, not a argumentative listening, because an example is meant to point to the moon. The example itself cannot be the moon. So he asked them, "So what is this tree?" That he said that there's something which is below the ground, which is called root, and there's something which is above the ground, which we call shoot. So together it forms a tree. Oh, acha. So in order to know the tree, I should know the thing called root below the ground and the shoot above the ground. Okay, I'll come to the root later, but what is meant by shoot? He said, "Hey, come on, yeah. So shoot is nothing but the main trunk, the branches, the leaves, the twigs, the flowers, the fruit, everything that comes on that. I mean, the whole thing is called the shoot. Shooting upward. That's the shoot. A big thing." Then he said, "Oh, acha. So I asked you what a tree is. That was a very simple question. And then you gave me two words, shoot and the root. And then when I asked for what is a shoot, you gave me 6 more words. And then if I'm going to ask what is meant by a trunk and what is meant by a twig or what is meant by a leaf, you are going to improve my vocabulary, but still you have not explained what a tree is. At the end of this entire search behind the definition of a term, I end up with a mass of vocabulary. But the travesty here is that I've still not defined the tree fully. Even if I have got a little idea of what a tree is, well and good. That's precisely what the world has done to us. That it gives us a mass of vocabulary. To say something as God, Swamiji says that you call something as God, by mere calling it does not become God. But then, this is precisely what we are calling knowledge. You are able to define a tree, you are considered to be knowledgeable. You are able to, you get your vocabulary correct, you are considered to be knowledgeable. A man who has got a list of 10 vocabulary, vis-a-vis a man who has got a vocabulary of 100 words. A man who has got 100 words is more knowledgeable than the man who has got 10 words. And much more will be 1,000 and so on and so forth. So more knowledgeable means he gets to know a huge mass of vocabulary about none of which he knows the right meaning. So it should be a mass of ignorance, not just vocabulary. It should be a huge mass of ignorance. But then, where this will lead to, where this line of enquiry, let's begin with this enquiry and let us try to stretch the enquiry to the extent. Why is this enquiry getting stretched? One after another. There is the vocabulary that we give is incompetent to give the proper description of the thing that we want to know. The knowledge is incomplete. That is leading us to the next enquiry. Now, this enquiry is going to become finer and finer and finer, and you take a huge leap. It is going to end up with what is the fundamental reality of existence. Every inquiry can be stretched to this particular thing called the fundamental reality of existence, because you are questioning the reality of a tree. By way of expressing a desire to know about the tree, you are questioning the reality of the tree. As a result, the vocabulary grew and it is leading to finer and finer things. And this chain of inquiry is going to stop at some point. Let us hypothesize that it stops. If it doesn't stop, hell with it. I mean, there is no scope, there is no hope for the human being. So the Shastra comes and says your inquiry is going to stop the moment you find the fundamental reality of the existence. And that fundamental reality is Brahman or the Atman. Okay, so now that I have known Brahman, but have I answered the tree? The doubt with regards to the tree still continues to exist, right? Yes, I have known the Atman, the Brahman, the supposed ultimate fundamental reality. But then my tree is not answered. Let us now look backward. So from tree I went to root and shoot. From shoot I went to the twigs. From twigs I went to the fibers. From the fibers I went to so on and so forth. Finally it goes to the akshara, a thing which cannot be further divided. Now, if my shoot is answered, then 50% of the tree is answered. Because the root is the other 50%. So by answering a lower vocabulary, my higher vocabulary is answered. Correct? So tree is a higher vocabulary. I started from the tree, top. That got divided into root and shoot. 2 children. Ashwattamenam suviruda moolam asanga shastrena dridena. And then the shoot is getting further divided into some names. Each of those names are going to further get divided into. So, as you go down this construction is going to stop somewhere, and Vedanta proposes the fundamental reality as the place where this stream of inquiry is going to stop. The moment it stops, that's where the light comes. That's where the power comes. That's where the knowledge comes. How? You get the knowledge of the Brahman, which was Akshara, that came from something above. Why did you go to the lower level? In order to find an answer. You found the answer. Once you found the answer, you found the answer for the above. Once you found the answer for the above item, then you have found the answer for the previous item. So finding the answer at the bottommost of this construction means you have found the answer for the entire construction. Because in order to know the tree, you need to know what is the root, what is the shoot. The moment you know what is the root and what is the shoot, you have known the tree. Full stop. So by knowing the children, you know the parent. Assuming that the above is parent, the below is children. So know the children, you know the parent. And the child of all, the entire construction get resolved to what singular entity called Brahman. So knowing that, you have known everything. Brahma Vidya, the entire Vidya of the tree and all its evolutes, all of them are now Pratishtha in the Brahman. So knowing that Brahman, what happens? It is not that you know the tree, it's not that you know the tree in its variations, but the question about what is a tree will be eliminated. The question itself will be eliminated because you know, you will say that this is Brahman. That kind of an awakening, a reckoning comes. So, being the most fundamental reality of this entire creation, the Upanishad says, knowing that you have known everything. And that knowledge is within me. It's not that I'll have to run behind something and go and find out. It's pretty much within me. It's up to 6:15, right? Or 6:15. Okay. This is a 3-part lecture. We will continue next week. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.